You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy. All right, this is going to be our last recording for the Modern People Leader until like the end of June. So
Why?
because I'm gonna be having a baby, and next week,
little thing.
Steven's gonna be in Vegas next week for a conference, and so we've been recording like
sad.
2 or 3 episodes
So
a
it's
week.
my fault, Jesse.
No. But so yeah, this is gonna be a fun one. And there's no better person to have our last episode recording for a while with. And so on that note, good news stories. Who wants to go first?
I go first. I'm excited. I'm off to Florida on Sunday for the Troop HR retreat, which is really exciting. Beautiful location on the Gulf of Mexico. Am I going to get kicked out of America for calling it that? I'm not sure.
You might.
I might.
Be careful. Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, wild. That's not one for this podcast. Yeah, I'm really excited to see the whole troop crew. It's going to be really great. It's always a really fun event.
I'm bummed. We love Troop HR. Tracy and Nicole, they're amazing. Taylor, who runs their podcast. We were originally planning to make it, but things changed. To Daniel's point, I need to be in Vegas next week, so unfortunately, we're not going to be there. But please say hi to all our friends at Troop HR.
I will. I'll send them love. Have a glass of wine with them for you.
Perfect.
You want me to go next, Stephen?
Yeah, Daniel, please.
So this year, what are we? We're almost into May. It feels like every week of this year we've built up good sales pipeline. And that's, I wouldn't say that's like new, but like it's way more consistent than it used to be. And as a 50% owner of the business, like there's no better feeling than having like that consistent pipeline every week. And just one of the many signals that our business is growing and that things are going well. And so that's my good news. I feel like all my other good news stories this week have been personal good news, so had to throw in a work related good news story.
Love that.
Predictability and revenue. It's such a when you start to have it, it's such a good feeling. So that is good news. My good news, I'm going to go work and I'm just feeling super organized. We've been doing MPL Live for technically 3 quarters. San Francisco will be our 4th. That's coming up. And we're getting better. We're getting more organized. We had our stand-up earlier today, our weekly stand-up. And we're super organized for San Francisco, and we've just launched MPL Live New York efforts.
New York, baby. I feel like I have to do that every time again.
Yeah, and it's going to be insane. Like San Francisco's already going to be insane. Like we added a pre-party. I think I may have mentioned this because
when is this?
This is June 5th, and the pre-party is going to be June 4th because there's like so much demand for social and connection opportunities. So we extended the party, and I can only imagine what things we're going to add in New York. So if you're an HR tech company or adjacent and you're listening to this and you're like, we need a sweet event to sponsor in September, hit us up.
So we keep coming back to the Annie Dean episode, and that's for a reason. Atlassian has mastered the art of running a distributed team, and Annie shared something that really stuck from their internal data. Daily office visits don't drive team connection, but 3 to 5 days of intentional togetherness, that does. They found that bringing teams together a few times a year led to a 37% increase in team connection, and that boost lasted about 4 or 5 months. So just let that sink in. It's not constant office time, it's not more Zooms, it's just one well-planned offsite every few months. That in-person time really matters. Not daily, but deliberate. Retreats, offsites, onsites, sales kickoffs. These are the moments that fuel culture, creativity, and collaboration. The problem that we see, corporate group travel is extremely painful to plan, and it's one of the biggest line items on your budget. And so that's where Marco comes in. They make corporate group stay as easy as booking a personal hotel room. Think Airbnb, but for groups of up to 500 people. One, they're going to negotiate on your behalf, so you'll get 20 to 30% cheaper prices on hotels. Two, the properties are handpicked for corporate group travel, so you're going to have the right mix of meeting spaces, communal areas, on-site dining options, and other group-focused amenities. Lastly, their AI-powered search makes it really easy for you to find that perfect hotel based on group size, city, vibe, whatever it is that you're looking for. And honestly, when Suman, Marco's co-founder, walked us through how it works, we were blown away by how simple it is to book group travel with them. Something that's been historically very manual and kind of complex. So if you're planning your next team offsite, leadership retreat, or full company gathering, I highly recommend you go check out Marco. There are no contracts, no signups, and it's 100% free. Go check them out at marcoexperiences.com/MPL.
All right. Well, today we're talking metrics and we're talking visualization. And I love me a data conversation. And so the interesting thing is I ran point with our customer development. So we conducted like product development interviews before we launched Build. And I interviewed 6 people, all people we're close with. I would consider them built for people, super fans. And when I asked, like, what do you want to see? What do you wish you could get a better handle on? I was, near the top of the list, metrics. And I was so surprised, but also not surprised to hear that. But it just was unexpected. And so where I want to start is like, a lot's changed. And from your point of view, Jesse, like what are some of the key changes you've seen from a people analytics metrics perspective over the last few years?
I think it's really funny. Like when I even think back in like my time when I was in London, like start of my career, I'm pretty sure there was like every year, like, Deloitte or whatever comes out with a list of like, these are the biggest trends in HR. And like for a really long time, it was like HR analytics was like the number one thing. I'm pretty sure if you looked up now what the trend is, it probably would still be in the list. Like, should we look it up right now? Like Deloitte HR trends 2025. Like there's almost no doubt it's going to be like analytics or something around data. Like it feels like one of those things that we've been talking about for such a long time. And I don't really know if we've actually really made like a massive shift in our working style of how we've actually really thought about it, if that makes sense. But there has been a lot of change in tooling and like a possibility. Think about the amount of amazing software tools now that exist to track. Like it's every cloud platform has like a, at least decent back end that you can take a look at some like pretty interesting metrics. Obviously you've got like AI LLMs now is so good at consolidating information and helping you kind of put it in a structured way. And I think just a lot of people now have really learned that they need to probably be a little more on top of what's going on in the numbers of their teams. So yeah, kind of everything has changed, but nothing has changed in a weird way. Is that a weird thing to say?
No, sorry, Dane. I was just going to mention, I saw a post about people analytics, and it was like, where should people analytics report? Should it report to HR? And I was like, why are we talking about where it should report? Like, why aren't we talking about why we haven't made more progress in people analytics? Like, we can debate the merits of how to organize it as a COE, or like, is it centralized or decentralized? Like reports to HR, reports to like, that doesn't address the issue that most HR teams this is Sweartonomics, most HR teams do not have the people analytics they need to do their jobs, is like my hot take on analytics.
Yeah. Hot takes. We love hot takes. What's your hot take, Danny?
Well, not so much a hot take, but I'm just curious your thoughts on how generative AI changes people analytics. So now we have access to a
Yeah.
tool that can do a lot of the analysis that we'd typically have to rely on somebody with like deep expertise on that. So like I think of like people that are experts in Power BI or Tableau, and so like not only are they able to extract the data that they're looking for, but they're then able to pull it into these dashboards. How much like I honestly don't know much about this. Has this
Yeah.
changed in the last couple of years with some of these newer tools?
So I want to say on AI and specifically on like in a bunch of places, but like I would say like my kind of specific hot take opinion on this is like AI is going to destroy productivity and effectiveness before it helps it.
Interesting.
I think like there's things that LLMs are good at, and then there are things that LLMs like aren't very good at independently, and one of them is like math. It's just they're not very good at independent math. And if you're the kind of person that maybe like doesn't is feeling like they need to like become more analytical in air quotes and just like make dashboards and make metrics and make insights, but you don't really know how to look at the numbers or what is actually going on behind what you're looking at. You don't know how to like do a like reverse engineer whether it's accurate. Then you're just going to be showing information that's not true or helpful. So I do think that like you still need to have a pretty decent baseline of like critical thinking around how to look at and think about metrics before you start just plugging a bunch of numbers into ChatGPT and saying like, can you spin me up a dashboard or can you send me some bar graphs? It just doesn't.
So we're not
just,
there yet.
No, we're not there yet. Not there. There are lots of tools that are doing interesting stuff, particularly like data cleanup. That could be really good. Like, I recently had a piece of work I worked on where I had to take like, I think like 300 something lines of data where people had input their phone numbers in all different ways. It was a really silly task. It's a long story. It doesn't matter. But people had input their phone numbers and a bunch of other things in all different ways. I basically I split the text into columns so I could just take the country code, but the country code was all messed up. Like some people had put a plus, some people had put brackets. So I'd like taken out the identifiable information, but then I meant that someone in my team was going to sit through and go through 350 country code datas and like correct them. And I put them into GPT and I was like, can you clean up all these country codes? These are the possible country codes. If you don't know how to identify it, let me know. And then identify each of them with an anonymized number so we can like track them back and just like a VLOOKUP to put them back into the spreadsheet. That kind of stuff is amazing. Like that job would have taken, well, it probably would have taken like maybe an hour, but it would have been really painful. But for a GPT to it just took me like 3.5 minutes and it took me no time at all. And then I was able to like use the data for something more useful. Now, that's not a great example of like a metrics thing, but it's a good example of like what are LLMs good at? What LLMs are not good at is taking like a very complicated piece of multi-tab or contextual information and then presenting it back to you in a line graph.
Steven, I think you're on mute.
Oh, that makes sense. I have tried to combine like mash things together from different spreadsheets.
Same
and we're just talking like basic number type things like sales type data. And it was disastrous. I literally like wasted hours of my time trying to find the prompts to get it right, and just garbage. And that's not involving sensitive employee information or data that's going to be used to inform decisions, et cetera. And so that actually doesn't surprise me. And so I guess like to zoom out a little bit, like what are emerging people leaders? How do they define people analytics and what are they looking at? Like, when I think about people analytics, I think about weird reporting requests and I think about the basic dashboard that we have to put together for our CHRO to present to the board. And so like, what do you see the people that are really, really good, like putting tech aside, like what are they looking at? How do they define analytics?
So I don't know if I'm going to speak upon on behalf of every single people leader, but I can tell you like how I think about it and how a lot of other people leaders that I've spoken to think about this.
Perfect.
That are kind of like metrics led. I kind of like bucket metrics into like three groups. You've got like health metrics, or operational metrics. You've got success metrics. You've got the kind of traditional HR kind of dashboard is more like this kind of like health metrics thing. It's like, um, how many headcount do we have? What's our sick days we have per month? Things that just kind of tell you what your company is doing now or has been doing. Um, then you've got metrics that are much more about like something that's happening in your team, like almost like an SLA, but about something that you're kind of constantly tracking. So you've got things like what's your time to fill, what's your attrition rate, um, and trying to understand like how can you kind of make changes to them to improve them. And then the final one, which I think is probably a little bit what we're talking about now, is like the success metrics is just you find a specific problem statement that you want to directly address. This is like the very like people as a product part of it. You set a metric to be able to get a feel for whether or not we're moving in the right direction. And that metric is not going to be something that you like are going to put on a health dashboard usually. Maybe for a while you may report it to your board or your exec team, but it's not going to be something that's like forever. Like for example, like you might put people with strong interview feedback consistently seem to fail probation. There's like a big correlation between those two things, despite the fact that the evidence should be the other way around. So, okay, so you put in, that's a problem statement. You draft it a little better than that. Then you say like, okay, well, we actually think that the problem is in the interview process. It's not in the probation process. So we're going to go in and like dive into interviewer feedback. We're going to see the distributions of interviewer feedback. And we want to see the interviewer distribution feedback in this specific team normalize closer to a bell curve. So then you may be tracking the distribution of interview feedback as one success metric and also tracking people passing your probation, which would be a usual kind of like operational metric that you might be looking at. And then you've got like this, you've got health metric, which is like attrition, operational metric, which is probation pass-through rates, and particularly people with like strong feedback. And then you've got success metric. We've got too many people that are highly distributed in positive interview feedback, despite maybe not actually having a good reason for giving that positive interview feedback. And we're going to try to specifically address that through training and programs.
And so I'm now, I almost interjected earlier, and there was a point in time, probably year 2 or 3 of the Modern People Leader, where we asked a question like if there's one thing that you could get more data on, or you could get like, more intel on. I can't remember the exact question, like what would it be? And I would say like 30-40% of the time it was people analytics and metrics. And now I'm starting to understand why, because what you just walked us through is not what is much more than what new hire metrics, exit metrics, kind of the typical can metrics that I would normally associate with HR. And so you shared metrics that are helpful. Like where, are there metrics that are just like vanity metrics, that you would look at like on a growth team that just HR teams obsess about, but they're really not that useful? Like, what have you seen with that?
So I definitely think headcount is like a kind of useless metric to look at. Like I actually think the best things to look at, like health metrics usually are just like a one thing in my experience. So it's like, at the board, you do want to look at headcount. Generally, like you want to understand kind of like what's happening on this big macro level of your team. But like HR teams, it's useful to know, but it's actually more useful to know like what's your headcount, like what's your manager to employee ratio. Like think about things in the context of other things that are going to make that important is what I would say is like the most important thing you can do. So if you're just looking at how many heads you are adding month on month, what is it really telling you? Like what is the story there? Is that in comparison to ARR per head? Is it comparison to your manager to headcount ratio? Is it in comparison to people that are having promotions within a quarter? So you're just like hiring new people in, but don't actually giving people opportunities to growth. Like that's one thing that I would say is really helpful, or really like could be better. It becomes not useful if you build a dashboard that just gives you static, non-contextual information. And then I think there's ones I have like some kind of like opinions about. So things like ENPS, I'm not a huge fan. I think like there's a lot of survey data. If you're reporting on that, like it's gonna be, again, can be really useful for a success metric if you've got a very specific problem statement you're trying to address. But if you're just like month on month reporting on your ENPS, but not in context with anything else, it's kind of just like, okay,
Steven, I feel like you might have some thoughts here, so I'll
Yeah,
give
I
it back.
mean, I do, and I would agree. I
I feel
think
like I heard you say this for like 5 years straight at Workify, and nobody wanted to hear it.
yeah, I mean, any companies become leaders at companies become so obsessed with numbers and scores that they lose the plot. And because the end game isn't a what can almost feel like an arbitrary score that is improving over time. It is being better at what we do and how we
Mm,
work, and insert your own definition of kind of your mission, vision, values. And so I agree with Jesse wholeheartedly. Now, when I sold Workify, was I trying to sell a metric? Absolutely, because we were trying to get people to use surveys, and I think that is the fundamental problem with surveys is they're overused. It's never been easier to deploy a bad survey, in my opinion. And so without like the intentionality, and it takes a lot of time and work. And to Jesse's point earlier, I think all of that energy spent on an engagement survey could be spent on looking at more kind of relevant, time relevant, or contextual, more relevant in terms of very specific use cases and contexts. And except no one ever has time for that. So no one ever really does that because we're so obsessed with our quarterly pulse cadence and then processing that and engaging managers on participation and then trying to
mm.
action things. So I I agree that those I would put ENPS in alone in like the
Alone.
non-useful bucket.
It's funny. I think like I definitely think we're gonna write up. I know we're gonna because it's already in our queue, but we're gonna write something about user research and forming hypothesis of user research. Like this is like a little teaser into how I feel about this. I actually think you have, especially now, this is one thing LLMs are great at with data and metrics and like getting information out. Qualitative data from a smaller sample size where you're getting more information is so much more valuable than quantitative data on a badly written survey that people aren't being honest on. Like you're better off picking a random sample of 30 people in your team and having a 30-minute conversation with them and asking them the same questions and then distilling that information into actionable takeaways than just sending out boring survey that people don't really feel engaged with and you're not getting a lot of information out of. That's my opinion.
Well, I'm gonna keep us moving because we got a lot more questions. I feel like we could spend an entire hour on surveys and different ways of getting feedback. And to your point, there's going to be a separate blog post on that. What's like the number one question that you get on metrics as it relates to people running your people team like a product team?
This is such a good question. I think that actually, I don't know if it's like the number one question, but it definitely feels like one that I get a lot, which is interesting to talk about. I think people in HR, okay, so we haven't got a lot of time, but Stephen and I are already in rant mode, so we're just going to do it, and Danny's going to have to keep us on track. Yeah. It feels like because HR leaders have traditionally maybe not been great at analytics, and they probably have also been like kind of, there's like a negative symbiosis there that exists where they are also being told often that, HR's too fluffy, HR doesn't, whatever. There's this feeling that like, oh, we can't measure certain things within an organization. We can't really measure culture. We can't really measure some parts of engagement. We can't really understand if there's a cause and effect between, performance and other programs we're doing. But like, I think we've already talked about this on the blog before, but the pod before, but like, in a lot of ways, HR has as much meat on the bone as like brand marketing, and brand marketing can do it. And I think like sometimes we need to like, have the confidence to really think like, what's the best way we could potentially show this? And then, fill it with other qualitative data, because qualitative data is data. It's just a different type of data. But I think this is kind of natural. Like, how do I find a quantitative metric for culture? And the answer is like, yeah, you're probably not going to.
I got laid off in November 2022. And I just remember having so many mixed emotions. I was sad, I was embarrassed, but I was also relieved. One moment, asking my wife if I should quit my job and try to make MPL work. And the next day, that decision's being made for me. And, I'm lucky. most people don't have a passion project to fall back on like the MPL. And it's terrifying and confusing trying to navigate your next steps after something like a layoff. And honestly, the outplacement services that were offered to me at the time felt pretty underwhelming. They didn't seem like they'd actually help. And I just remember feeling frustrated and a little bit bummed. I thought about asking for more support, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I realized that the leaders managing the process were just as overwhelmed and frustrated as I was. They were being asked to do more with less. They were handling these layoffs with little support or guidance, all while trying to protect the company's culture and take care of their people. And so that's why Career Sandwich's mission really hit home for me when I met them. It's not just another outplacement service, it's holistic transition support that helps both individuals and the people leaders who support them, giving everyone a little bit of peace of mind during a really crazy time like a layoff. And they do more than just help your alumni brush up on their resume. They help them tell their story, from figuring out who they are to defining where they want to go next. Career Sandwich helps them craft a narrative that really makes sense of the journey, and their platform is pretty sick. There's one-on-one coaching, there's group workshops, there's on-demand resources that are designed to help alumni really articulate their value, the story, and feel a little bit more confident about their next steps in a time that feels very uncertain. And so, if you're an HR leader that's having to part ways with people from your team and need support, making this process as least crappy as it can possibly be, then I highly recommend checking out Career Sandwich. If you want to get in contact with their team, go to careersandwich.com/MPL. That's careersandwich.com/MPL.
And so I want to talk about how people can, HR leaders can start to kind of open their minds a little bit to new metrics or new ways, because I empathize a lot with HR leaders because you've got IT who's telling you, oh, you got to use our, we have an analytics team, you need to use the analytics team. And so it can feel sometimes like your hands are tied. But I think what I'm hearing is the good news here is there's opportunities for new types of metrics. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to use cutting edge technology, and there may be new ways of looking at some of the traditional problems that can help us overcome some of the challenges that we've had in the past. And so as a metric oriented person, like what would you say is the first step that someone can take if they're looking to revamp their metrics dashboard, or just to start to create a culture of a more metrics driven HR team?
Such a good question. I really did not think I was this kind of person for a very long time. I think that a lot of this actually comes from your own internal self dialogue, or at least for me. I don't think it's true for everyone. Definitely for me. I think one of the things I've had to really teach myself to be good at or do is, I think it goes back to the kind of hypothesis and problem statement thing again, is you have to really love figuring out what the problem really is, what's the truth, and be as open and excited about finding out that it's something you didn't expect as it is something that you think might be happening, right? So you have to be as curious about being wrong as you are about being right. And then honestly, it comes through practice and being comfortable, really going in. I spend a lot of time with that, trying to be as open headspace as possible about I'm doing my executive board report at the moment, and every month and every quarter we have to submit a narrative and then a page of metrics that we either are tracking regularly, so health scores or success metrics, and then other things we're spotting around the company that are interesting. So it means you have to kind of go out and sniff in what is happening here. And you don't want to be that person that's just sharing something because it looks like it's cool on a graph. I really want to be like showing something. What's an interesting story that exists within this data? Like, what can I find out that's true? Which involves me sitting on a lot of the time on HubSpot, on Bob HR, on Ashby, on Google Sheet, and just doing pivot tables and playing around with stuff and looking at things and trying to understand correlations. And the more time you spend doing that, actually, the better and more natural you become at both spotting when things don't look quite right, back to our LLM point. Like the amount of times I put something into an LLM and been like, can you make this into a thing? And immediately I've been like, this is wrong. Whereas someone else in my team has been like, oh, this looks good, right? And I'm like, no, immediately you can see that. Like there's no drop off there. Why would we have a drop off in June that we actually had attrition not spike? So those kinds of things help a lot.
I feel like you're probably on another level when it comes to creating the pivot tables and things like that. But I've learned for myself, just like simply knowing the metrics and looking at them every week can help you tell that story. Like, for us, we look at the same 10, 15 metrics for the business every single week. I'm updating the numbers, I'm pulling the numbers, I'm sharing the numbers with Steven. And the more reps you get in on that, I feel like the better you get at, like, one, being able to identify like what you think the problem is and being curious about it, and then you can go and find more data to either validate that or not.
Yeah.
And so I guess like on the storytelling side of it, like half of the equation is just finding the data to either prove or disprove, whatever hypothesis you have. And then there's like the storytelling piece. How do you think about, like, as a skill, how have you gotten better at this skill over the years?
I was going to give like a very, very simple tip on this, which is like, I actually think the best thing you can do, kind of to your point, I tell my teams very often that I actually want them manually interacting with data. Like, I think dashboards are great. Automated dashboards are great and super helpful. Like, I look at them all the time and I don't want to have to manually create like every single dashboard I look at every week. But actually saying to someone, like, actually pull it out in Excel, pull it into a Google Sheet and make the thing you're trying to see. It actually will end up really helping you because it does two things. First of all, it forces you to interrogate and actually look at the numbers. Like, it's so easy to go to Bob and just download a PNG and put it onto a dashboard and not think about it again, or send it off to someone on Slack. It's much more difficult when you're actually looking at the raw numbers in a line chart and then a bar graph and then moving back and going like, oh, actually, whoa, that number looks really bad in September. Like, what's that about? Like, it helps you like kind of really think about it. And the second thing is, just a big spreadsheet of raw data is like impossible for a human to pass. So you're going to go from this huge complicated thing that's impossible to pass. Hopefully you don't know a lot about what's going on there, or you have some theories. And then when you start building into a way that you can tell a story, so like, okay, I want to look at our attrition data month on month over the past 12 months, all of a sudden you start being like, this doesn't, I don't really know what this is trying to tell me. Or you can start feeling your own brain try to like unpick what isn't clear about this for me anymore. And then all of a sudden you'll strike on something. You're like, wow, this actually looks like the thing that I'm trying to say. Or like, this looks like the opposite of the thing I'm trying to say. What the hell's happening here, right? So I think manually interacting with data, and then you can go back to Bob and, pull the exact same report if you want it to be prettier. But the point is, like, try to get to that place where you're like manually thinking about it, because it puts your brain into problem solving mode and interrogation mode.
And I would add that every HR leader should, or like a lead of a part of HR should try to practice a discipline of like defining critical numbers. Like this is a concept that I didn't learn in HR. I actually learned as a CEO of a startup, and having a data obsessed co-founder who was constantly asking me like, what are the critical numbers? What, and for, obviously as CEO, is things like, ARR growth. It was things like, churn,
Sales
renewals.
pass-through rate.
Right. And for engineers, it was, the velocity and the ramp up time, how quickly they were contributing to code. But what I learned by having like a critical numbers practice is, just because you think a number is important to track doesn't mean it is. And I really related to what you just shared, Jesse. And the reason why is because I don't know any leader that hasn't at one point thought like, okay, I really need to track this thing, only to find out, actually, it's not, to your point, it's not really telling me anything. But a lot of people just stop there and they're just like, oh, well, we're going to keep looking at that though, because what if it does change someday? Or what if it does become meaningful? And the reality is, like, it might just be a critical number that we shouldn't be tracking. And so what I do is, like, we look at our critical numbers and we add to, you know, as Daniel said, we track everything weekly. And and by tracking weekly and looking at just a few numbers, you know, on that kind of cadence, you begin to learn. That's like how you begin to get comfortable and get a sense for, like, okay, is everything normal here, or do we have a problem, or like things great? But the other thing you'll notice is, like, if it doesn't tell you much, like, maybe we should add a few more. And so if you look at our metric sheet, you'd probably be overwhelmed because we track a lot of things on there. But
Yeah.
I think, you know, having like a quarterly checkpoint on, like, hey, we've been tracking these numbers. Is it working? Should we track it something else? Is super, super helpful. So that's my kind of feedback to the listeners. What is an example, Jesse, of a time when visualizing people data or, you know, people metrics has changed the direction of the business?
Oof. I've got a.
It's like ominous with the sirens going on behind you.
I told you, New York is heaving
I
constantly.
love it.
I've got a kind of interesting one that is from years ago, actually. It's about comp. I worked at a company where we did compensation reviews every year annually on the person's, and people thought it was fine. I ended up taking a look at comp changes over time, like progressive comp changes. We had a huge amount of history, but the company had been around for like a couple of years, so we had quite a few people that had kind of like reached that milestone. And what I was able to show pretty easily by like creating like essentially like a kind of stacked bar graph of like when people had their performance review changes, depending on which quarter you were in. If you had a performance review in Q1, you were like likely to get a 10 or 15% higher pay change than if you had one in Q4. And like the reasons for this are obvious, right? Like Q4, you're at the end of the year, your budget's running up, people are feeling a little nervous about where things are going to go. We haven't done the new year yet. Q1, everyone's like loaded with cash. We got the new forecast. Everyone's like, woo, baby. And we were a pretty seasonal business, so Q4 was like a big quarter. So yeah, I was able to pretty quickly show like actually doing this is really detrimental to people. It wasn't very difficult to do. And yeah, it was really helpful. Changed our whole comp strategy. Hopefully it's usable. It'll just be like coughing a lung up. We haven't got enough time.
I think that was definitely usable. So I was reading through the draft that you put together for data visualization, or I can't remember the exact title of the effective data visualization, I think is the name of the blog. This hasn't even gone out yet. I think by the time this episode airs, it will have. And there's an entire section where you're just like going in on pie charts. And so I had to ask a question about the pie charts. Like, explain to us your beef with pie charts.
I hate pie charts.
I can tell.
I hate pie charts because I think they're massively overused in HR specifically. The frequency at which I see a HR dashboard, we have a pie chart showing like percentages of different reasons people left the business, or percentages of reasons people took a day sick day. I don't even know. Sick day's not a good example. Holiday reasons or like time off, right? The thing is, like, pie charts are really bad for a brain to be able to compare information against. It's very, very difficult to tell the difference between like 2 and 7% on a pie chart. There's no, like, because it's the scale is smushed into only a circle. Everything has to be relative to the pie. So in a bar graph, you can kind of like say like, oh, I'm going to start at $50,000 for a salaries. And then you can see much more detailed differences and like comparisons between information. Impossible at showing change over time. You just cannot do it. It's useless, in my opinion. Like it's the perfect example of like a static like block of time. So, you know, who cares if you have, 10% of your team taking sick days, if we don't know if those 10% of the team are all taking sick days in the last month, or whether it's actually been fairly evenly distributed across the entire year. It's a useless visualization, in my opinion. The only time I ever like pie charts is if you're making a chart of how much pie is remaining in a pie. Then you can go nuts.
Or pizza.
Or pizza.
Yeah.
What other reason? Like, you have like 3 categories maybe, and you're just showing over the course of a month. Like,
and so does the beef with pie charts extend to the donut chart?
Yeah.
I.e.
Absolutely. No, I
Joking,
just think it's
joking.
like
That's just the fancy pie chart.
it's a fancy pie chart. It just for me is usually an indicator that somebody like it doesn't isn't maybe super practiced on how to like display data in a useful way. Um, and like that's not a reason to be mad at them. It's a reason to be still mad at pie charts for being so goddamn everywhere. They're just like so pervasive. Um, but I think it's also like it's actually hurting you if you're using pie charts usually because you're not telling a good story with a pie chart.
And I think, well, in my experience, a savvy executive or leader, um, most would agree with anyone that's seen a lot of charts, a lot of visualizations, and is like metrics driven, shares the similar point of view. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of setting ourselves up to not feel comfortable with that seat at the table if we're just presenting pie charts, because it's safe, it's easy, and it's not particularly helpful. At least that's been my experience. And so we gotta it's time to elevate the game. And with People Ops as a product, and there'll be a follow-on blog to
Mm-hmm.
this, but there are some core metrics that you suggest, or that
Mm-hmm.
in past experiences have been super helpful. What are a few of your favorite?
I've already kind of indicated one right now, which is like I think like the most important thing for me is like the correlations between other pieces of information. So, interview feedback to probation to first performance review rating. Like, is there like a clean funnel there of people like demonstrating high performance throughout those three processes? Um, I'm a fan of the RANDS test, which is a different way to kind of assess employee engagement. Um, I think about regrettable attrition in a very specific way. I ask three questions, like, would we rehire them? Would we fight to retain them? Like, are we going to try to keep them in the team? And then do we have any regrets about how we as a business handled the exit? I think all three of those things actually, like, if you do all three of those things, and that is like the most regrettable attrition you can have. That's like you got an F minus on the regrettable attrition scorecard. But if you had, well, we would rehire them, but we wouldn't really fight to hire them. We wouldn't fight to keep them right now. They're not quite the perfect fit for time being, but maybe they'll come back in a couple of years and be great. And we handled the exit really well. That's like kind of an A on regrettable. Yeah, the person's regrettable ultimately in the long term. Like, maybe someone that you would want to come back and it might be hard. Anyway, that's the kind of three that I think are fun.
For
Love it.
for
Well,
that one, does depending on how you respond to those three questions, is there like a score that's assigned, or like how are you aggregating that data?
That's a great question. I actually used to do like an aggregate score, and the way that our current backend is set up on our HRIS, we can't. But it's easy to upload that and change that scoring if the functionality changes. So I used to give a point for, let me try and remember this. There's like a point system that I gave. So regrets about how we handled the exit always got a lot of points, because you should never have regrets about how you handled an exit, even if the person you wouldn't fight to rehire and you don't want to retain. Like, I think that's like that's a bad indicator. Fight to retain is second most points, and then would we rehire is third most points. I don't remember if there was like, I don't think it was just like 3, 2, 1. I think it may have actually been like one had like 5 points or something, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
and what's Saran's test? I'm embarrassed to say I don't. This is new to me. Tell us
Really?
more. Yeah.
So the RANDS test is a ripoff of a test that was made by a software engineer, Joel. Let me see if I can. Oh my god, it's so bad I don't remember the name of this person. People are gonna be listening and be like, "How dare you?" I'm trying to get this.
It sounds really smart, whatever it is.
It's Joel. Joel, what's his name? You know what I'm talking about?
I think I do, because I feel like somebody brought this up on the podcast like a year and a half or 2 years ago, and they explained it to us, but I definitely need a
Yeah.
refresher.
Okay, here we go. The Joel test. It's a software engineering test, and it's made by Joel Spolsky. Could have tried to guess that. So the Joel test is a test that you use in engineering to try and work out like how bad is your code quality. So it's things like, do you use source control? Do you make daily builds? Do you have a bug database? Like, the basic stuff to understand, like, is our code quality in good condition? And you ask those things to try and get like a health test on like your code quality as an engineering manager. Um, It was then adapted by another software engineering leader who made one around creating like a team health metric. It's on a blog called Rands and Repose. Again, it's like from software development leadership. And they ask 12 questions very similar to try and get a feel for how healthy your employee base is. I've kind of adapted it a little more because it's a little, I think, still not exactly the way that I'd perfectly do it, but it doesn't really matter. But it's questions like, do you have a one-to-one? Do you find that one-to-one useful? Can you explain the company's strategy to someone that doesn't know about the company? Does the person that's in charge regularly get up and tell you what they're thinking? Do you buy what they say? Do you have time to be strategic in your role? If you find out information that you're wondering if it's true, do you know where to go to prove or disprove it? Like, and what you're trying to do is get like a really good read on like, what is the specific element of engagement that is most likely to be in danger? Is it manager relationships? Is it strategic investment? Is it information density? And then you can attach each of those. And maybe then you want to do a different kind of survey, but that's the RANDS test. And you get 12 points. 12 is perfect score. 10 is bad.
We need to figure out a way to create like a Jesse test or like a
I wrote a
build
whole blog
test.
about this.
It'll be tough to find the right words, but I've definitely read the Rands test. I don't know if it was like a blog that this Joel guy put out a long time ago, but I took this copywriting course, and one of the assigned readings was the Rands test.
Ah.
I had no idea what. I mean, I kind of got it, but yeah, we've had a lot of chief people officers come onto the show, and if there's one thing that they have in common, it's that they run their org their way. I think of people like Crystal Boyson at Sprout Social, who completely rethought performance reviews for her company, ditched long form questions, created 3 clear ratings, which they then can auto calculate into a final rating. I think of Carmel Galvin from Klaviyo, who ditched the generic way of measuring quality of hire and built a custom framework tailored to each team. I think of Jessica Zwaan, who tracks LTV to ECAC to evaluate every single manager. Like, these are the exact kinds of people leaders who wish they had a tool like ChartHop. And for those of you who aren't familiar with ChartHop, ChartHop is a flexible people ops platform and HRIS that brings in all of your people and business data into one place. So think, HRIS plus having the ability to bring in data from places like Salesforce. And they let you customize key processes like headcount planning, compensation, performance, and engagement exactly the way that you want it. No rigid templates, no one-size-fits-all playbook, just the flexibility to build the systems that you truly believe in. With ChartHop, you can really run your org your way. If their platform sounds like something that you want to learn more about, I highly recommend that you go request a demo. Just go to charthop.com and make sure to let them know that we sent you. I never expected this to come back up on a podcast.
Here we are.
Very cool. Okay, so I know we're eventually going to do an entire episode on employee lifetime value to CAC payback. I guess, like, where do we start here? Like, how did this come onto your radar, and why do you find it so compelling? Like, why is this metric, an obsession of yours?
It kind of feels a little bit like my white whale in a weird way. Like it's, it's just like, I've already talked about the fact that I really love comparative metrics. You're looking at like 2 pieces of data to try and understand what's happening. ELTV to CAC for me is like kind of the most perfect way to measure the effectiveness of, similar to like LTV to CAC is like the perfect way to measure the effectiveness of your marketing team. Like, how much are you spending and how quickly do you get that back? And then how valuable those customers. People teams are basically there to do the same thing. They're there to optimize a great hiring and acquisition strategy, which means you're finding really good quality people and bringing them in, that you're able to get them up and performing really effectively and maintain that performance as long as possible and get like a good lifetime value. But the team are, as much as we hate to say HR, like the team are resources for the company. Although they're humans, you have to treat them like humans. And the final thing is you have to do it without like bankrupting your business. Like, how do you do it really cost effectively and organizationally design effectively? Things like, org design is such a hard thing to measure when you're doing a good job of it. But if you have really like flabby and effective org design, that's kind of a great way to really negatively impact your payback, because you're spending so much money on people to potentially get like not the best payback from them. So anyway, I find it really helpful because I think it's one of those things that if you get to a place where you can get LTV to CAC for employees or for HR teams, you would actually have such an incredible read on the effectiveness of your HR team, like as commercially as sales or marketing.
So before I forget, I feel like we need to schedule like an MPL Build webinar where we only talk about ELTV to CAC. I feel like a lot of people would want to try to calculate this. I know it's not the easiest or like most perfect thing to calculate, or sorry, let me put that another way. It's not the most easiest. It's not the easiest thing to calculate, and it might not always be perfect. But I think to your point, even imperfectly, it's worth tracking. So yeah, if you guys are game, I think we should definitely do that.
Always game.
Yeah, for me, I think after I got over how different of a metric this is, and I understood conceptually what ELTV to CAC payback was capturing, I instantly became obsessed. It took a little while though, and I think with others that I've spoken with, at least, it is that there's been like a similar moment, like an aha moment, like, oh shit, that okay, that's what we're trying to capture here. And for me, it's really hard to find a apples to apples way of comparing managers or leaders like commercial effectiveness. And to me, commercial effectiveness, like we want, I don't know a lot of companies that don't want their people to be commercially effective. And that is, and what I mean by it's hard to find like an apples to apples way. The way that sales is going to be commercially effective is very different to how your client success team to your product team, et cetera, et cetera. But with this measure, I think if we can agree that, okay, in order to be commercially effective, our people, are need to be contributing to, we need the best talent to contribute to this company in order for us to drive revenue and contain costs. It, if you can get the calculation down, now we have a number that, we can apply to all managers, and we can start to, on a somewhat level playing field or like context, start to measure people against each other. And in itself, like, this calculation is inherently telling us if, you are being efficient with capital, because, every time we lose an employee, or, the more often we're losing, people, the more costs like are going to be incurred.
Yeah.
And so there's that, like that, there's that direct connection, but there's also this broader, like, our people, we need our people, our best talent to be commercially effective. And so how do we get a number that will help us measure that? ELTV to CAC payback. And so I'm looking forward to the teardown, the follow up on that metric. I know we're running out of time. Again, the hour just goes by so fast. And so for HR teams that want to level up their analytics game, let's talk tech stack, or not even tech stack, but just like what is the resource playbook look like? What should I be? What sort of tools should I have to enable my team to really give me the metrics I'm looking for?
I think pretty much every like good cloud-based HR tool is going to have like a pretty good backend for metrics and setting it up. Ashby's is so good on the recruiting end. For example, I would say get your CSM at your tool, whatever it is, to sit with you and do a whole session on reporting and dashboards with your team. And particularly focus on how do we make sure that the data we're putting into our system is architecturally good enough that we're getting what we want to get out of it. So that's a good first start. The second thing is level your team up on Google Sheets. And if you don't have time to level them up on Google Sheets, give them tasks on Google Sheets and tell them that they should use ChatGPT, anonymizing data, to help them answer, like, how do I create a formula? How do I get to this point? Get your team like up and running on being able to create stuff on sheets. And then there are like, I mean, I think the other resource that you should just be able to go to and use is like, go to the person in your team that's really good at this. There's going to be someone in finance. There's going to be someone in BI. There's going to be someone in engineering. There's going to be someone in marketing who can tell you how to tell a story with data. So I'd say like, yeah, making sure your data is going in really well and that the system's helping you. That's your CSM, whatever HR tool you use. And that could be something as complex and interesting as ChartHop, or something as simple as like Bamboo HR, right? You can pull data out Bamboo HR. Then use your own ability to use Google Sheets and like manipulate data in interesting ways. And then finally, leverage other people that are good at telling stories with data.
And so wait, there's no data lake. I don't need like a enterprise Power BI or Tableau. Yeah. Okay. Just want to make that clear for those out there. You don't need all of that. I mean, it could be useful, but you certainly don't need it.
Yeah, for sure.
Is it one word or phrase? Close time?
I think so. And you better go quick, Daniel.
I'm going real fast. So I'm gonna say
that was one time.
I'm gonna say the Zwaan test. It sounds a little bit more, sophisticated than using your first name. So we're gonna have to figure out an acronym.
No, I like it.
Yeah.
Good pronunciation, by the way.
I had to correct myself, by the way.
That's fine. Second time's a charm, baby. I mean, in Australia, I go there and my Australian relatives will be like, Jessica Zwaan? So yeah, fine. Zwaan is good. Pie charts is fine. Let's give them a time in the sun.
Nice. All caps pie charts. I'm going to go with be curious, because I think all it takes is a little curiosity. And for the people, I know this is, if you're not good with the numbers and the spreadsheets, it can be a little overwhelming, intimidating, but there's, call us, DM us. Like, we would be happy to help. And I ran an engagement survey company. Jesse has a ton of an experience and just really cool take on operational metrics. Cause I feel like there's also a lot that you have to share on, what are good measures and bad measures. Like, we didn't even get into like that part of the conversation. Maybe we can riff on that another day, but be curious, people. Like, be curious, reach out to us and let us know what you want to hear more of. Also, I think that's it.
Nice.
All right.
Y'all.
Bye, guys.
Till the next one.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.